Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing the 12 Tiger Generals of Wu Let's Talk Lore series with episode 9 featuring Xu Sheng. Born in the Laoyan Commandery, Xu Sheng and his family fled south to the Wu Commandery after the Qingzhou rebels ravaged their hometown. In the year 200, Sun Quan, who had just taken over from his late brother, recruited Xu Sheng to a minor officer position, or 别部司马, mainly because Xu Sheng had a reputation for bravery in the Wu Commandery. With threats on all sides in those early days after Sun Ce's death, Sun Quan ended up giving Xu Sheng 500 troops as he would be sent to garrison on the western outpost of Chaisang, where Xu Sheng would also be named as the local mayor. Here, Xu Sheng would famously hold off an attack by Huangzu's son, Huang She, who attempted to take over the Chaisang outpost with an army of around 3,000 troops. At the time of the attack, Xu Sheng had only a little over 200 men inside the garrison at Chaisang, but he and these troops fought fiercely as their arrows killed or injured over 1,000 of Huang She's troops during their assault. And just when it looked like Huang She's troops were about to take the walls, Xu Sheng ordered his men to open the gates and charge out in a surprise sortie that farther decimated Huang She's troops to the point that their morale collapsed as they routed back to the Jin province. The defeat was so decisive and devastating that ever since this loss, Huang She never launched another offensive campaign against Sun Quan. Conversely, in the early 200s, Sun Quan started to launch his own offensive campaigns against Huangzu in Jiangxia. And during this period, Xu Sheng was promoted to captain, or xiaowei, and redeployed to Wuhu as the mayor to deal with the local Shangyue threats, where he would eventually reach the rank of lieutenant, or zhonglangjiang. But this rear deployment also meant that for a long time, Xu Sheng never saw action in any of the major Wu conflicts such as Chibi, the subsequent attack on Nan, the first siege of Hefei, or the defense of Ruxukou. The first big battle that Xu Sheng would take part in would be the 215 siege of Hefei, when Sun Quan pretty much brought everyone with him as he amassed an army of 100,000 troops. Here, during Zhang Nao's surprise sortie with 800 riders, Xu Sheng and his retinue immediately found themselves overmatched as after the death of Chen Wu, Xu Sheng and Song Qian charged out in an attempt to shield Sun Quan's escape. In this initial exchange, Xu Sheng was personally injured by Zhang Nao, while his troops were routed, as his unit even lost the command flag after the flag bearer was killed. To halt the full rout, Officer Pan Zhang killed a few of the cowards who were leading the rout before organizing the rest of Xu Sheng's troops to charge back and at least retrieve their command flag. But at this point, with Xu Sheng's injuries, there was no choice but to retreat, as Xu Sheng's first taste of a grand battle will leave quite a bitter taste in his mouth. A few years later, in 217, Xu Sheng would finally get a chance to redeem himself during the defense of Ruxukou against Cao Cao. At the time, the concealed military docks at Ruxukou presented a big issue for Cao Cao's forces, so Cao Cao attempted to bypass it using a land route. In response, Sun Quan sent Xu Sheng and other officers to block Cao Cao's advance, but on their approach using a naval route, storms once again became a major issue as wind blew some of the Wu ships out of formation and directly onto the shore where Cao Cao's troops were gathered. Clearly outnumbered and with no one sure what to do, Xu Sheng led the charge from the ship onto the shores of Cao Cao's encampment, despite being badly outnumbered to the surprise of everyone, including Cao Cao's troops. Soon after seeing Xu Sheng's troop cut deep into Cao Cao's encampment, the rest of the Wu forces came to their senses, as they too would press the attack as Cao Cao's forces were finally pushed back at Ruxukou. But despite this massive showing, Xu Sheng was only commanded verbally by Sun Quan, as it would take until 221, after Sun Quan had made Wu a willing vassal to Wei, that Xu Sheng would be promoted to the rank of general with the title of Jianwu Jiangjun, or the general who builds the martial ways. He would also receive a low-tier marquis title of Du Tinghou and get the civil appointment as the administrator of Lujiang. In the following year, during Liu Bei's attack on Yiling, Xu Sheng led the pursuit after the successful fire attack, as he would personally wipe out many encampments of Liu Bei's troops. In the aftermath, he and General Pan Zhang vocally supported the continued attack of Liu Bei at Yong'an, but they were overruled by Lu Xun, Zhu Ran, and Luo Tong, who believed that Cao Pi would not sit idly by after Liu Bei's defeat, and that it was more pressing for Wu to shore up their northern defenses, which ultimately proved correct. And sure enough, by September of the same year, Cao Pi will launch a massive three-front assault of Wu. During this time, Xu Sheng served on the eastern front under General Lu Fan, as they faced the Wei forces under General Cao Xiu, Zan Ba, and the sickly Zhang Liao. During this face-off, the initial exchange heavily favored the Wei side, as storms complicated the Wu naval defenses. In a particular bad wind gust during November, many ships along with their crew were thrown by the storm onto the opposite shore, where the Wei troops made short work of these unfortunate souls. Eventually, the naval defense collapsed as the Wei vanguard under Zan Ba attacked deep into Wu territory, burning much of their supplies and siege weapons. Finally, it would take until Zan Ba overexerted himself that Xu Sheng and Quan Cong were able to counterattack and push the Wei forces back across the river. In this last phase of the campaign, the Wu side finally evened some of their losses by killing Zan Ba's top lieutenant in Yilu and a few hundred of Wei troops, but overall on the eastern front, the Wu losses were much heavier, with thousands killed and much of their storage of supplies and siege carts destroyed. A few months later, when Cao Ren and his son Cao Tai renewed the attack on Ruxukou, the Wei side finally took some heavy losses after Cao Ren spread his forces too thin, which gave the Wu side a chance to divide and conquer, especially as Cao Tai's main forces failed to make any progress at Ruxukou. Ultimately, Cao Pi's first campaign against Wu would end in a stalemate, as both sides accepted a ceasefire. In the aftermath of this successful defense, Xu Sheng will be promoted to Andong Jiangjun, or the general who stabilizes the east, and take up the Marquis title of Marquis of Wuhu. A year later in 224, when Cao Pi personally launched another assault of Wu near Guangling, Xu Sheng came up with the plan of constructing dummy forts and straw soldiers all the way up and down the shorelines near the Wu capital Jianye, in an attempt to scare Cao Pi from launching his naval assault. Initially, most in the Wu court opposed Xu Sheng's plan, as they believed it would be a great waste of resources, but after Xu Sheng insisted, Sun Quan ultimately adopted the plan. And overall, this plan worked, as when Cao Pi personally inspected the Wu coastal defenses, the sheer number of forts near Jianye made him rethink the invasion plan, and then after one particular bad storm in the fall of 224 that almost toppled Cao Pi's own flagship, Cao Pi lamented that it seems that the heaven decided to use this river to divide Wei and Wu forever, as the planned naval invasion was ultimately called off. So naturally, after Cao Pi's retreat, Xu Sheng was praised for his dummy fort strategy and foresight. Now, this would be the last records of Xu Sheng in the history books, as we do not know his exact year of death. It is clear that he was no longer alive during Sun Quan's coronation in 229, so he must have died sometime between 224 and 229, and he will go on to leave behind one son in Xu Kai, who would inherit his retinue and Marquis of Wuhu title, and go on to be an officer in the Wu army, despite no farther record of his achievements going forward. But at least we know he didn't break any laws and lose his command. And with that, our episode on Xu Sheng comes to a close. Next time we will return, we'll move on to cover the life and career of our 11th Tiger General of Wu in Pan Zhang. So hopefully you all have enjoyed this episode enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more content on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below, or just by hitting the like button. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye!